Conservative American Message, hosted by the one and only Cam Lau. It is Monday, November 11th, 2023, and we have finally reached our 50th episode. The great Billy Graham once said, "Racial prejudice, anti-Semitism, or hatred of anyone with different beliefs has no place in the human mind or heart." Don't forget to follow and subscribe to the Conservative American Message on Instagram, Facebook, Threads, X, Truth Social, Spotify, YouTube, Apple, and Amazon, and everywhere else. It also goes a long way when you guys share the show on social media, so please continue to do that to help us grow our audience. Another GOP presidential candidate finally wised up and called it quits on his campaign last night after the third Republican debate. Tim Scott has finally come to the realization that it was never going to happen, and he announced it on Fox News. With Scott and Pence both out, we should start seeing all of the other losers get out before it's too late as well. If the others hold out until the Iowa caucus, it will only embarrass them and probably stunt the rest of their political career. I guess to Chris Christie that wouldn't matter, though. It's just so hard to come back from something like that, you know? Anyway, here's what Tim had to say on the way out the door.
Without any question, Trey, one of the things I would recommend to every single American, I know it's not possible, by the way, if you ever want to love your country more, run for president. Traveling this country, meeting people has been one of the most fantastic experiences of my entire life. I love America more today than I did on May 22nd. But when I go back to Iowa, it will not be as a presidential candidate. I am suspending my campaign. I think the voters who are the most remarkable people on the planet have been really clear that they're telling me, not now, Tim. I don't think they're saying, Trey, no, but I do think they're saying not now. And so I'm going to respect the voters, and I'm going to hold on and keep working really hard and look forward to another opportunity.
You are suspending your presidential campaign. You have plenty of money. You have the highest approval numbers of any candidate that is running, and you're a couple of states away from coming to a state where you are beloved, and you are suspending your presidential campaign.
Romans 8:28 is such an important scripture. It says that all things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. I think the message is clear for me right now. I am indeed suspending the campaign.
I really appreciated that quote he had from Romans because it's so true. I'm sorry, but God's will is not for Tim Scott to be the president, so he really nailed it with that one. But seriously, this whole race has always been about Trump and DeSantis. I may not have considered Ron at the beginning, I'll admit that, but he has definitely gained some momentum. But Nikki Haley, I mean, come on. No way, no chance. For now, I'm still riding the Trump train, but if it does derail, I'm hopping in with DeSantis. The looming government shutdown is less than a week away, but the Republicans' new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, has a plan to buy some time for Congress to work things out. This plan involves approving funding to certain essential agencies through January-February time. He's made it clear that he has every intention to fight this battle and win conservative victories within the federal budget. And he had better. The lack of effort on Kevin McCarthy's part is exactly what opened up the job for Mike. This test is likely to determine whether the hardline conservatives of the party will allow him to keep that spot. Like I've said before, this fight is one that needs to happen. I don't really care if the government has to shut down. It's not a deal breaker for me. If that's what it takes to show the Democrats that we are dead serious about making some doggone budget cuts, that's what we gotta do. The federal government spent $6.1 trillion in the last year, which is down 2% from the previous year. And guess what? 11% of that $6.1 trillion is just the interest on the national debt. Meanwhile, they collected $4.4 trillion in tax revenue. But in the case you passed first grade math and you know that 6.1 is more than 4.4, you'll realize that we're still spending more than we're making. So that remainder of about $1.7 trillion has to be borrowed, adding to our massive national debt, which has now reached $33.7 trillion. So if we don't stand up to this outrageous spending now, we may never be able to turn it back around. It might actually already be too late now. Of course, there are some people, Democrats, who love to see the government spend more money. Like public school teachers in Portland, Oregon, who recently went on strike demanding better pay. Now, if you want to have a debate about whether or not we should pay teachers more, I'm down to have that conversation, but the teachers in Portland do not deserve anything more than the teachers across the rest of the nation. Their public schools are actually the absolute worst in this country, and paying those teachers more will not solve the problem whatsoever. When the entire public education system is preoccupied with diversity, equity, inclusivity, and all that garbage, as opposed to, I don't know, math or science or maybe even reading. 49% of fourth graders in the United States cannot read at a basic level. Our education system is failing, no doubt. But throwing money anywhere into this broken system will not solve any problems. A higher teacher's salary does not equal better quality education, nor does more investment into special ed or administration. I'm not saying that those things are inherently bad, but don't be fooled by the teachers' unions who claim that more funding equals more education. The root cause of all these issues lies within the curriculum. Anti-Semitism is at an all-time high around the world ever since this war broke out in Israel. You would think that given the situation, there would be an overflow of support and sympathy for the Jewish people, but instead, the hate for Jews has been emboldened. And I'm not just talking about within the Middle East. Those Muslims have hated Jews for centuries. What I'm far more concerned with is about those in the West that are spewing Jewish hate. It's really hard to comprehend that people whom I personally know post these silly infographics on their Instagram stories that express support for Hamas and the Palestinians. The ignorance of these libtards is shocking, and I have to assume that it's ignorance. Only some sort of neo-Nazi could sympathize with a literal terrorist organization like that. Hamas, Palestine, it's all practically indistinguishable at this point in my opinion. Sure, there are good people in Palestine, no different than there's good people living within North Korea or Iran, but that doesn't excuse the whole nation. The ideological Muslims that are currently at war with Israel, whatever you want to call them, are not oppressed people fighting for their rights. They're terrorists. They're literally slaughtering families in the streets, men, women, children, babies. The more kills, the more honor they earn in their religion. Israel is the only stable democracy that aligns itself with the West. I think former President Richard Nixon laid it out perfectly back in the 90s in an interview.
You make the observation in your book, and you say that you've said it many times when you were President of the United States, that no president is ever going to desert Israel. Right?
Correct. I put it more bluntly. I said, as I told congressional leaders during the 1973 Yom Kippur War, no American president will let Israel go down the tube.
All right.
Democrat or Republican, it's not an issue.
That is stated fairly categorically, and yet in your book you make it clear at the same time that Israel really is not of any enormous strategic value to the United States anymore.
That's correct.
So why then would the United States continue to burden itself with huge loans, in some cases outright grants, to the Israelis, jeopardize possibly young American fighting men, when there is no strategic value involved, or little strategic
Because the
value?
United States is concerned by more than strategic values. That's maybe a weakness, but it's the way we are. And there are moral issues involved here. We don't have an alliance with Israel. As you know, they're not an ally of the United States in the technical sense. But we have a bond to Israel that's much stronger. It's a moral commitment. A moral commitment because of what happened during the Holocaust, and a moral commitment because it is a democracy, the only democracy in that area. And under the circumstances, that is why American presidents and the American people in the future will support all out the survival of Israel if it's attacked.
But now, we live in an age 30 years after that where people in my own generation are so far removed from things like the Holocaust or even 9/11. We didn't live through these events, so we don't have the same emotional connection as most Americans. But that does not excuse somebody supporting Palestine. Of course, it isn't just us dumb kids who are so ignorant to the constant oppression of the Jewish people for centuries. The United Nations has all but condemned Israel for simply defending itself. An article directly from the UN's website is titled, "Civilians in Gaza Must Not Be Collectively Punished for Atrocities Committed by Hamas, Urging Ceasefire." These idiots are calling for a ceasefire after thousands of rockets were fired into Israeli territory and innocent civilians have been massacred. Now that Israel is fighting back, now it's time for a ceasefire. No way. Justice has to be paid. Who was calling for a ceasefire when the World Trade Center was attacked, huh? Certainly not the UN, but maybe it's a little bit easier when the attacks don't happen in your own city. The bottom line is that our Jewish friends are under attack, not only in Israel but around the world. A Jewish school in Montreal has taken gunfire twice in the past week. Mein Kampf, Hitler's famous book, has grown in popularity recently, specifically the Arabic translation. People all over the United States are being fired from their jobs for anti-Semitic hate speech on social media. And not just gas station cashiers either. These are doctors, lawyers, professors, the so-called educated and elite. Even congressional leaders, unsurprisingly the Muslim ones of course. Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib threatened Biden for supporting Israel by claiming that she has such a large Muslim base in Michigan that he has to make a choice between winning Michigan in the next election or protecting Israel's sovereignty. At least most members of Congress understand how wrong that is, and she was censured by the House. In short, if you have any qualms about the United States backing Israel, you are a Nazi, my friend. Well, that's all I have time for. Were you offended by this podcast? Good. Thanks for listening, guys. I really appreciate you all. Have a great week and stay conservative.